Thank you, Tim. I'm Mark with iSpot, and on behalf of iSpot, I'm really thrilled to be moderating this afternoon's Fireside Chat with Adrienne. For those who may not be aware, iSpot is the leading measurement and analytics platform built for brands. We partner with all leading advertising brands to help them understand, brands, of course, including Google, to help them understand really two primary KPIs around TV and video advertising. First, how advertising campaigns perform at building brand, and secondarily, how TV advertising campaigns perform at driving business outcomes. Kind of the two primary things and reasons that brands would advertise on TV and video. And because we're going to be speaking about challenger brands today, iSpot, in fact, is a bit of a challenger brand ourselves, challenging the way that decades of measurement have been established around legacy providers. And so we're excited about the future frontier of measurement. Getting to our Fireside Chat, Adrienne, I'd like to say welcome to the stage.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everybody.
How are you doing today?
I mean, I've been judging, so I've been here since Friday. So I'm as tired as you guys will be in about 3 days. So I'm a little bit exhausted. So we're hydrating and we're ready to go.
We're hydrating. You got a head start by coming early to do some of the actual judging.
Yes.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We won't grill you about the results.
Nope, can't do it.
Under lock and key. Could you start by giving the crowd a little bit of an understanding of your role as Vice President, Global Consumer Marketing at Google?
Of course. So as you guys know, Google is a pretty big shop. So we are broken into multiple verticals. They're called product areas, PAs. So if you think about Google horizontally, there's products that you probably all know and hopefully love, like your search product from a software perspective. That sits in one PA with apps and services. There is the vertical that is one piece. So think about Pixel, Nest, everything that you've got in your home. That's a vertical. And we all know cloud from a B2B perspective, and you know YouTube for music. And what I like to say about platforms and ecosystems, it's literally everything else that maybe you don't know as much that we need you to start to love, which is why they hired me at Google. So we lead Android operating system, Chrome, Chromebooks, Google Play, developer, education, basically everything that keeps almost anything that you're driving or using running. My team leads, and our job is to really start to think about platforms and ecosystems in a way that enhance the lives of consumers so that you know it, not just the technology that's been invisible for many, many years.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. There's a lot more than
There's a lot going on.
people give credit for, you bet. So getting into your background and your experience, your journey from athlete in college to a marketing executive at Under Armour and then Nike, and now tech executive at Google, has been defined by what you have called your challenger spirit. How do you define challenger spirit?
I mean, I think the person who was just sitting here prior to this conversation talked about it a little bit, but I think being an athlete my entire life through college and really thinking about the world through a different lens has allowed me to take on unique responsibilities and challenges in ways that others probably wouldn't. The ability to, no matter if I was out of undergrad an assistant media planner at The Gap or now a vice president of one of the biggest organizations inside of Google, rolling up your sleeves, getting in the work with the team, thinking about how to zig when our competitors zag, and having the courage to actually lean forward and do new things to start new conversations. So the challenger spirit is like that underdog spirit that I just have always had. You have to have if you're an athlete. And taking that to the day job has been this unhidden skill set that I didn't even think I needed that has really propelled me over the last 20 years.
Do you think, could you give us an example of, I'm always excited to hear about college athletes, student athletes, and taking that mentality of competitiveness and ferociousness to the court.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that, a glimpse into what that looked like for you being a student athlete?
Oh gosh, so go way back then. So if I think about how I got into sport, I'm actually originally from a town in Ohio and moved to Texas, took on sport in order to just find family and kind of tribe. I am not tall. I have a sister that's 6'1" and one that's 6'2". I'm about 5'8", and I wanted to play volleyball. So choosing a sport where in Texas, your average height is 6 feet, I'm 5'8", and walking on that court and thinking I belonged was the start of the fight, right? Being a setter throughout a really good program in high school into college, is something, there's not a lot of black, today it's different. 20 years ago, there were not a lot of black setters. So if you know volleyball, a setter is like a quarterback. So the stats are the same when you think about the ethnicity of like your receivers and your running backs versus your quarterbacks, not a lot of black athletes. So they were always wanting me to move to a defensive or an offensive position, not lead the team. And so thinking about the grit it took to say, this is the position I want. I think I can lead a team when I was, 16 until I was 22, and being told no and continuing the perseverance on what it takes to get to that spot and earn it. I think, again, when you think about underdog spirit and grit, it started in sport, walking on that court, not being invited, and continuing to push forward. So being able to take that DNA into a place like Under Armour, for example, when I got there in 2008, that brand was about $450 million. And so we grew it to about $4 billion in less than 6 years. So you can imagine the underdog mentality you need to have to go up against a Nike that was about $30 billion. And so our whole positioning that myself and our team built was about a challenger spirit. How do you actually bite at the ankles of the 300-pound gorilla and get them nervous? And when we ran that brand, it was the first time any company, so Under Armour at that point, and now it's a very different brand. We'll have drinks to talk about where it's gone. But then we were the number 2 brand in the US. So we took on and moved Adidas out of the way, and it was us and Nike. And that is because we had positioning of a challenger spirit. We were very clear about our DNA, and nothing would stop us. And I think me leading that brand team with the same DNA I had back at a 16-year-old setter is what helped us get there.
Growing any business 10x in 6 years is a feat.
Exhausting.
To not be understated.
Right. I mean, I think there was a moment where we were growing 20% a quarter for 24 quarters. So like that kind of growth was hard to maintain, but also taught you how to go slow to go fast, because you could burn out quickly. That industry and that brand specifically burned people quite quickly. But thinking about the end in mind and taking those steps to get there, managing a founder, doing all those things, I think equipped me with a next level kind of mentality to get me through different industries like tech.
So we'll get to Google here in a minute, but I think the career progression that you just mentioned, working for the underdog, establishing success with Under Armour, and then Nike comes calling.
Yeah.
So it's inevitable, but it's also a sign of success.
Yep, I hope so.
So how were you able to maintain that kind of challenger mentality then going to Nike?
Yeah, so it was an interesting jump. So if I go back to college, I'm one of those OCD-like individuals that very early on knew that I wanted to work in marketing. This is one of my college teammates. I call everybody a teammate from Howard University in the stands. So knew I wanted to be in marketing, knew I wanted to be in sports marketing, and knew I wanted to work at Nike. So I had set that path for myself in high school going into college. When I went through, so I actually started at the Gap way back in the day, and so this is like 2000. And at one point, Gap was a very, very iconic brand. Again, not what it should be today, but the brand we built back there was like my MBA in school. From there, went to Target, and then Under Armour actually came calling because the founder of Under Armour went to college, Maryland, down the street from where I went to college, Howard University. Anyway, my thought was, okay, maybe my intention isn't to go to Nike, it's just to get into sport. So, I've learned over time, just say yes. I applied to Nike probably 200 times. It went into a black box. No one ever reached out. So it was like, just say yes to sport. Spent 12 years at Under Armour. And so what I believed is it's too late to go to the brand of my dreams. So I will build the brand at Under Armour the way I would have built a brand like Nike had I had gotten a shot. So out of nowhere, Nike calls to run their biggest geography, North America. And they called because of the work I did at Under Armour. And so again, when you think about your path going in these divergent ways, I didn't think I'd get the shot to go to my dream job. But stepping into Nike, leading North America at a time, this is now 4.5 years ago, where they had to restructure how they're thinking about the business, the consumer. North America is the core of Nike. They needed to move to digital first. We needed to modernize. So they brought me in to actually think like an underdog versus the 300-pound gorilla that was quite easy in doing the things they had always done. And so being able to come in and break the model to rebuild it, team first, was humbling but also the most invigorating experience I've ever had. So I didn't see it coming, but when they came knocking, it was an absolute yes. And to be able to lead that organization in the most important geo is something I'm quite proud of for lifetime, I think.
In some respects, it's almost more challenging to take an established brand, break it down,
Beyond.
and regrow than to be the original challenger that has nothing but upside, right?
That is
Like you're going
correct.
up. So you've done both. So
I've done both.
Congratulations on that. It takes a different skill set and mentality, but I guess a consistent theme is that challenger, curiosity mentality.
That's right.
So here's a tougher one. Marketing tactics are evolving. Modern marketing techniques are here. Clearly, AI is all over Cannes and everywhere else. How do you maintain, as a brand and as an individual, the challenger mentality in the face of modern marketing techniques?
Well, I think, first of all, and there's nothing but marketers in this audience, I think there's a couple of marketing buzzwords that grate on my nerves just a little bit. And every CMO speaking about what it is to be a modern marketer is one, right? The full stack is another. Thinking about integrated storytelling is not. We've been doing these things for many, many years, but if you use the lingo, then you're sort of up to speed on what it looks like. Modern marketing is something that Under Armour was doing before, digital first was a conversation. When you think about the ability, basically it just means being always on, where the consumer is, as they expect you to be, with content engaging enough to stick, so that you keep coming through that funnel and you keep engaging with the consumer. That is modern marketing, a 365 offense. And so I have always run that play, because when you come from brands with less dollars, you have to be extremely innovative on how you reach the consumer. And so we had one of the first digital platforms at Under Armour back in 2014 that actually broke the internet. We were using that language back then. So to come to Nike as an example, or even to Google, and it's organizations with much broader wallets and the ability to reach consumers all over the world, taking that playbook into, let's talk about Nike. We introduced a direct offense during the pandemic. And we were really nervous that the pandemic would cause people to stop making luxury purchases. Tennis shoes and t-shirts are not a need. It is not bread and butter and bleach. And instead of shutting down, all traditional media shut down as it needed to, but we turned on digital 365. We invented what we call a direct membership offense, where we wanted people to sign up to Nike.com to become a member, but to do that, we needed your information. To get your information, we started doing shoe drops. A Giannis shoe drop used to be live in Milwaukee. It was now on sneakers. So you're bringing hundreds and thousands of people in to engage with your brand, not with bottom of the funnel storytelling, but with engaging content that we know they know and love, right? So you're running a direct offense through Nike.com. You're doing the same thing with our third-party audiences, and your social, your owned and your earned platform allows you to be the paid media that you don't need to spend against, right? So one of the things I'm doing at Google right now with my area is we've got to push our social networks to a point where it was at a place like Nike, where you don't have to spend hundreds and millions of dollars on a launch for product. You can do it within your own channels because you have an engaged audience. But to do that, and at Google, we are starting really from scratch on building a social network that has the stickiness we need. But it's a little bit of paid, it's a little bit of earned, it's getting the right influencers in our space and the right products make them keep coming back. So to me, that is modern, and I think so many of us have been doing it for so much longer than we're giving ourselves credit for. Right. We just have to pause and look at those case studies and remember.
Yeah. I like that. Buzzwords are just buzzy, and they're not what gets a job done, and marketers like you have been getting the job done for years before there were terms for it, or they've been rebranded to be called something else.
That's right.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Google and your experience there. So you've clearly embraced and had a foundation for this challenger mindset, as you've discussed, through your early career. Moving to Google, how are you continuing to integrate the challenger mindset at Google as you have for the past couple of years, but also looking to the future of what kind of is ahead of you to market at Google and bringing more of this challenger mindset to those products and verticals?
Yeah. So I would say at Google, it's an interesting point of view because if you look at the revenue of Google, it's really hard to call ourselves challengers. So last I checked, it's about $280 billion worth of trying to be a challenger. So that's tough. But if you think about the portfolio that we lead, and really the others across the organization, we are very much underdogs in culture, right? So the way that I have stood up platforms and ecosystems, think about what I said I run, Android operating system. Okay, so we're in Europe actually, but there's probably mostly North American folks in here. If you have an Android device, raise your hand. Okay. If you have an iPhone, raise your hand. Okay. You see the problem here? So when you think about being a challenger, my job is to hopefully shift people from being in love with the iPhone and understanding the power of Android devices, Samsung, Pixel. There are so many, and if in Europe actually, and in Africa and in India, it's the #1 market share. But in America, that drives culture, iPhone, hands down. And so when I joined the organization, Google is, we have some of the smartest humans I've ever worked with in my career, probably in my life, but we're really kind. We don't like to poke the bear. And I come from a place where, you know, in order to be heard, you got to shake the room every once in a while. I talk to my team about moving conversations to the edges of culture. And to do that, you got to make people a little bit nervous. So as an example, if you have an iPhone, which I think was 3/4 of this room, and you're talking to an Android partner, friend, colleague, and you have that green and blue bubble problem, and you have pixelated photos, and you can't name your group chats, and you're blaming Android users. I mean, I've seen this. I've come in, and by the way, before I got to Google, I was all iPhone all day. A marketer, so I was in the ecosystem locked in. But Apple does things intentionally to bring people to their side of the fence and ensure you never go back, like making the experience terrible with an Android user. That's actually bullying. There's a whole bullying stat. Don't get me started. If you carry an Android device, kids feel bullied. So there's all these stats. So we started a campaign that we talked about, #GetTheMessage, and educating consumers that it's actually Apple that is the problem. And we've actually never had a provocative conversation poking the bear that is Apple. We're also frenemies, by the way. We do a lot of business together.
This is SMS versus
this is SMS
versus
and RCS.
RCL technology.
Correct,
yeah.
correct. So the Apple is intentionally ruining your communication chain. And this is a world about accessibility and equality, but Apple's intentionally doing something to break your communication and making it hard on Android users. That's a problem. And so to bring that challenger spirit into platforms and ecosystems was unheard of, to the point where I had to present our strategy to our CEO, Sundar, on 3 different occasions to help him feel good about me going out of our doors with it. But the trust of our leaders, Lorraine, who is an amazing CMO, was like, it's time for us to start shaking trees. And I think, you could think about Google as this big behemoth or a challenger brand, Chromebooks against Microsoft Surface, Apple against Android, the Apple App Store against Google Play. There's so many fresh, fruitful stories to be told, and that's what our team is all about.
Right. Alphabet collectively, right?
Yes.
There's so many different things, and yet even within those verticals, there are dominant players and there's challenger brands.
Correct.
And you gave some great examples of where you're a challenger in,
That's
in those areas. That's fantastic. And all of us have been a part of those discussions around SMS versus RCL, but not everyone knows the technology.
You guys, go out and advocate for Apple to fix the problem. This became a commercial. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah, it did, and a successful one too.
Thank you.
So maybe kind of wrapping up, and we may have time for questions, we may not, but I wanted this is a growing room of marketers. It's kind of a packed house now that you've been talking here, so thank you for that. What advice would you give to the marketers in the room about taking a challenger mentality to their brands and to their marketplaces going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit bullish on the topic. I'm not saying that everybody needs to take that positioning, because by the way, if every brand took a challenger position, it would be again as vanilla as some industries find themselves. I guess beyond being a challenger, I would say as marketers, it's our job to mine the insights, to obsess the consumer, to know the product better than our product people. I've come from apparel, from footwear, now into tech. And I could say, coming into tech, I knew nothing about software, nothing about hardware, but what was in my bag. But being able to understand the product so deeply that you can break down and find the nuances that crack in new stories and reasons to care is our job. And so when you're in rooms with, and being at Google, it's so different from my past lives. There was never a time where the product people didn't bring marketers along. When I was at Under Armour, when I was at Target, when I was at Nike, the marketer really helped build the full strategy all up. In product, if you're in tech, marketing can sometimes be seen as a function. When I heard that what is a function? We are integral to the business. And so you can't be that unless you deeply understand the product truth, unless you can push the product organization to make even better product based on the consumer insight that you have. You should know the consumer flat out better than anyone else in the room. And you should be unafraid to push at what must be true to build the stories, the narratives, the experiences that you need to drive share forward or drive engagement forward, whatever your OKRs are. So what I would say is challenger works in the spaces I have been, but think about what needs to work in the spaces you're in, whether it's CPG, apparel, footwear, tech, and find your way into those spaces based on the quant, the qual, the data, but also the art and science of this. Like everybody, part of modern marketing and the buzzword is like everything must be measurable. Everything must be, sort of data first. Mm-hmm. And I call bullshit on that too. You need to know the facts. They always need to be in your back pocket, but gut also matters because, again, you are at the forefront of culture. So you have to be able to have that push and pull relationship with your organization to show your value day in and day out.
That's awesome. That's great. Whether we have time for it or not, I think this crowd is going to have questions for you. We're going to open it up for a couple questions before they tell us not to. Sure, question right there in the front. And hopefully there's a microphone that can come your way. Sorry, he's white glasses.
Sorry, sir.
Hi. First of all, thank you, Noah Mallon with Imagine. Your career has been so interesting. You've been at so many really interesting brands. And I get the sense that you set very high goals for yourself. So I'd love to know what's something you haven't done yet, but that you hope to do.
That's a really good question. I do set very high goals for myself, and then I do check in on those goals. And so I said it earlier, out of undergrad, I had some were silly objectives, like be a CMO before 40, which was deeply silly now that I look back at it, because if you're driving towards titles versus experiences, you're screwed. It's just a wrong way to look at the world. But I have set these gates, usually around 5 years, of the breadth of experiences I want to have. And so I would say the couple things that I want to do next would be probably embedding myself more inside of product. To be a great product marketer or consumer marketer, you really do need to understand the build of product. And so I'm excited to be in a place like Google where, our leader in Android, a guy named Hiroshi, is literally a genius that might have 800 patents that can't wait to talk about it. And so just to sit down with him and break down what's true about the product and what we're building has made me just a smarter human, always being curious. So I think one is getting directly into product, potentially. And the other is probably to lead an organization beyond marketing. There's two things I want to do before I'm done, and I feel like I'm close to done. I am old. But before I'm done, I want to be a leader of a multifunctional organization, so not just marketing. Because again, it's not about the skill set you have at this stage, it's about leadership capabilities. And I think one of the things that I love most is driving people to pull things out from themselves they didn't know was possible and just bringing new innovations to the world together. So I just want to lead a team cross-functionally, and then I want to start my own thing. I think as a Black woman in this industry, marketing all up, I'm usually in a room where I could count on one hand how many of us there are. And I remember starting my career in 2000 and looking around and feeling the same way. And so the fact that we have not moved fast enough to be the representative organizations that we need to be tells me that I need to lead something bigger to pull more people into the industry at large to diversify what we see in the room. Because the next generation, I'd like to not have that observation I had coming out of Howard and that I have 20 years later. So I think those are the two things I think about the most. Also, it's really hot.
Another question. Yes.
Thank you. Adrienne, you've done such amazing work from a multicultural lens. You mentioned Misty Copeland at the beginning. You also mentioned Google Pixel with their real tone. Can you just talk a little bit about how you incorporate multicultural marketing and insights into your everyday work?
Can you introduce yourself? Because Alex comes from Under Armour, out of undergrad, as a brilliant young marketeer, strategist, operations leader, and watching her now shine as a fully formed adult makes me want to cry constantly. So maybe introduce yourself.
Thank you. So, hello, I'm Alex Kennedy. I'm the EVP of Commercial Strategy at MyCode Media. MyCode is a multicultural media company focused on helping brands connect with Black, Hispanic, Asian, and the LGBTQ plus audiences.
Okay, so your question is how I think about multicultural in the world. I mean, we just kind of hit on it and not meaning to, but everything I do is through a lens of diversity because I am diverse. And I think being part of an underserved community and understanding what it is to, and this is just as a young person, not a consumer yet, that language was not formed, but to understand what it looks like as a person to feel like I'm not seen in storytelling, to not see myself in advertising, to not aspire to be the thing I see in a product that I love is problematic. And so as I grew up as a marketer, I think one of the subconscious reasons why I wanted to do this was to tell the stories of the underserved so that it doesn't have to feel the same way. And when you look at the tapestry of every market we live in, not just the US, it is more diverse and will continue to be more diverse than ever before. And if not addressed, brands will die. And so my perspective has always started from a multicultural lens and telling a story of the tapestry of what it means to be in culture. I was lucky enough to be at Under Armour when we could sign ballerinas like Misty Copeland instead of just another athlete that we had thousands of. I was lucky enough to be at Nike and we could tell the story of Black female athletes, WNBA players, who are ignored and or laughed at, and put money towards it and give them the platform that they actually deserve. And so if we're not you don't need, this is not a shot at multicultural agencies. I think everything is needed. But as a marketer on the other side of the table with, a lot of different agency partners at your side, multicultural should be, it is the work. It should be in everything you do. At Google, we just talked about this. We had a couple agency partners whom I love, I have worked with all my life, but they weren't coming in with a team of diverse makers. And so I stopped the work. And I told them that they need to address their talent or we're not going to work with them. And I think what's nice about Google, which is so different than Nike and Under Armour, is we put our money where our mouth is and the money's deep. And so if agencies actually cannot show up and represent whatever market we're in and whatever consumer we're serving, as long as we've been partners, that relationship will have to end to go learn how to be a modern agency that we all expect. And being a leader in this organization allows me to have that ability to say the things that others may be afraid to say, to create the change that we need, but it can't just be a few of us. And it doesn't have to be the diverse ones of us to do it. So I think that's how I think about the multicultural space, but it's so much more than the output of the work. It's like how you get there, how you think about the world, and how you force representation in every bit of what we're doing to make it happen.
Adrienne, on behalf of Brand Innovators and iSpot and all of the marketers in the room, thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, guys.